You know, if you know someone well, just say it's your spouse or your sister or your brother or your parents, you know what their pet peeves are, right? You know what irritates them. And I think all the couples are like, yep. I mean, I know that Kirst, one of her pet peeves is a dirty sink, you know, a sink full of dishes. Like, it just gets to her, you know. So I know by now that after over a decade that we can't have a sink full of dishes, you know. But there are other things that are also an irritation to her, and that is, she says that, you know, when you step outside at night and you look up, you don't see that many stars. You know, she gets really annoyed by that because that's not how it always was. I mean, now in Joburg, with all of the pollution, you step out, you look up, and you can count like, you know, 3 stars maybe. But if you're on the countryside where there's no pollution, man, the sky is just littered with stars. And man, the night sky should be something that just awakens in us a desire to worship, you know. When the scriptures say the heaven declares the glory of God, it literally means when you step out at night and you look up at the sky, you're just like, your breath is taken away because of the wonder of the number of stars, you know. So obviously we don't get to see those stars in Joburg, but just Google what a night sky actually looks like, you know, out in the bush where there's no pollution. But I don't know if you ever thought about what makes a star shine. What makes a star shine so bright? Because it literally is millions and millions and millions of kilometers away. See, what makes a star shine is because within the star there is nuclear fusion going on. There's nuclear energy that collides with one another at such a tremendous rate, at such tremendous power that it's giving off light and heat. And that's what makes a star shine. I mean, just think about it. That's mind-blowing. And so it is almost like atomic bombs are fusing, going off all over the galaxy and the universe. And in today's text, Paul talks about us as Christians that we need to be shining as bright lights, shining like stars. And if you think about that concept, I wonder why perhaps you often don't shine as bright lights. Could it be that the very essence and nature of Jesus, everything about him, his holiness, his goodness, his righteousness, his justice, his grace, his mercy, his judgment, his compassion, all of those things about Jesus are not colliding inside of us all the time as we're getting to know him, as we're getting to immerse ourselves in him, and that makes us shine bright in the world. Just think about that. I think often our light is so dim or it's busy dying because there's nothing really going on inside of us. There is no fusion of energy going on inside of us. And so Paul alludes to that and what that in a way should look like in our text today. So turn me to Philippians chapter 2 and verse 12. We carry on in our text. He says, "Dear friends, you always followed my instructions when I was with you, and now that I am away, it is even more important." Right? So he's saying, you know, when I was with you, you guys, you followed my instructions. That's great. But you know what the real test is? The real test is when I'm away, when I'm no longer around, are you going to follow my instructions? Are you going to be the same? You know how it is when you're kids and when the teacher is in class and you're in the best behavior, but as soon as they're out of the room, man, like you're up to no good, right? Even in a lot of our companies, man, if the boss is around, you're in your best behavior, but you feel like as soon as the boss is out, as soon as the boss is away on holiday or whatever the case is, you just, not only do you just relax, but now you're just up to no good, you know. Yeah, you can come to work late, you can leave early, because no one is watching over you, no one is supervising you, no one is making sure that you're following and obeying. But he's saying, man, this is my hope for you, that even when I'm not with you, that you will continue to follow Jesus diligently and wholeheartedly. And this speaks to a people who start to take ownership of their faith. Right? People who start to take responsibility for their faith and the community that they are placed in. Not a people who go, well, because the boss is here, therefore we'll behave accordingly, but the boss is not here, well, we're just going to do whatever we want. This is what he's saying. He's saying, man, you follow my instructions and I'm with you. Even more important, a real true test of your faith is what you do when I'm not around. And then he carries on and he says how this should happen. He says, work hard to show the results of your salvation, obeying God with deep reverence and fear. Work hard. Now, I don't know if that word work hard is very appealing to you. I think for a lot of people, hard work is not appealing. We don't look at the Christian faith as something that involves hard work. You know what I mean? I mean, we often think it's something that we just have to be and ease into and just enjoy the presence of God, and all of a sudden, all the fruit happens in our life. All of a sudden, the results are produced. But he's saying here, work hard to show the results. In other words, there must be some results. I think we can fall into one or two areas where, on the other hand, we go, this is God's going to do all the work, I don't have to do anything. Or we overwork and we strain ourselves to the point where we think that, man, everything is up to us to produce fruit in our lives. And over hard work, I mean, that's, I just remember in my matric days, I mean, when you grow up in the kind of culture that I grew up in, and especially the schools I was part of, those are very result-oriented schools. You must produce results. So when it comes to matric, man, it was like, you must get as many A's as possible. That was the drive. And so the last few months of matric, where there was no more classes and all you had to do was be at home and study, our schedule was nuts. I mean, this was my study schedule, trying to get A's. Wake up in the morning, start studying at 8. Study for 4 hours till 12. Take a 2-hour lunch break, then carry on in the afternoon from 2 to 4, then take a 1-hour tea break from 4 to 5, then study another 2 hours from 5 to 7, then take a 1-hour dinner break till 8, and then study for another 4 hours from 8 to midnight, and then go to bed, and the cycle carries on. So that comes to 12 hours of study a day, working so hard, trying to get your A's in matric. Because you have to get those A's, because otherwise you wouldn't get into the degree or the university degree that you wanted to. And looking back, it's just nuts. Like what was I thinking? But I was part of the culture that just said, this is part of the norm. This is what you do. I mean, I ended up getting 3 A's, which wasn't bad, but that was not great either. From where I came from. We should have gotten majority of A's, and so it was bad. And I think sometimes we can err too much on one side or the other of the Christian faith, but it seems that Paul is alluding here to the fact that there should be some work involved, right? This is not an easy go, easy come kind of faith to show the results. In other words, in the Christian faith, in your walk with God, it should be evident that you have been saved and that you are being saved. There should be evidence of the work of God in you, and if there is not, then chances are it's not necessarily God's fault. Perhaps we've not been doing any work inside of us. That nuclear fusion, that nuclear energy is not colliding inside of us because we have become too passive. And he tells us what should govern all of this. He says, obeying God with deep reverence and fear. That is what should motivate us to work. Not because we're going to go to hell when we die, but because we have such a deep respect and reverence and awe for God. That fear is not a fear of punishment, but it's the kind of awe that you have, when you're standing on top of Table Mountain and you see everything and you go, wow, this is beautiful. And I've written something up there, Lizzie, next slide please. God should never cease to amaze us. Never. That should be the driving force of the work that we do in order to show that we are saved. He should never cease to amaze us. If we get to a point in our Christian walk where we lose the deep reverence and awe and wonder of who God is, we're in a very dangerous place. That if we're here this morning, we know that the fact that, we're not here worshiping because Astrid is so good on the keyboard, or that SK and Bianca have such lovely voices. Yes, they help us worship, but we're here because we are worshiping God. And so, if God ceases to amaze us, if we get bored with God, we shouldn't expect to see any results in our Christian walk. Because a deep reverence and a deep awe for God is what should drive us. And it's a healthy kind of reverence. You know what I mean? I've been married now this is our 10th year, and I have a healthy reverence for my wife. I'm not scared of her, right? I'm not scared of her that way. I'm not scared that she's going to beat me up. I'm not scared that she's going to shout at me. I'm not scared that she's going to kick me out of the house, or I'm not scared that she's going to, make me sleep on the couch or whatever. I'm not scared of her that way. But I have a reverence for this relationship. I have a reverence for the fact that she's my bride. I have a reverence for the fact that she is one with me in that sense. And so I don't intentionally want to go and hurt her. I don't intentionally go out of my way to make life miserable for her. I don't intentionally go out of my way to do things that I know will bring her deep pain. You see, that's a healthy fear. It's a fear that you don't want to bring the one that you love pain. And this is what he's saying here. To have deep reverence and fear for God. That you don't want to cause him pain, because you don't want to show him that the salvation that he has accomplished in you is not bearing fruit. The results are not evident. This is what Paul is saying. And then he carries on in verse 13. He says, "For God is working in you, giving you the desire and the power to do what pleases him." So in other words, he's the one who initiated the work, right? Just the fact that you even have an inkling in you to want to worship God, just because you have that remote desire to want to follow him and please him, God is the one who drew you towards him, and God is the one who gives you the power to do it. So you see the tension here. This is a text that has always baffled so many people, because some people say, it's all God's work and I have to do nothing. And others say, I have to work so hard and overwork. God is saying it's up to me. What's the answer? The answer is yes. The answer is it's both. God works, he gives you the desire, he gives you the power, but you have to do the work in order that you'll be able to shine like bright stars. So what does that look like? He carries on in verse 14. He says, "Do everything without complaining and arguing, so that no one can criticize you. Live clean, innocent lives as children of God, shining like bright lights." That's what he says. You must shine like bright lights in a world full of crooked and perverse people. So this is how he's saying we can shine like bright lights. He's saying there's a comparison here with people in the world who are crooked and perverse. See, here's the difference. A person who does not know Jesus, a person of whom the living God is not living inside of them, they're still stuck in their old nature, right? They're still stuck in the ways of the world. They're still going according to their fleshly desires. And so, in a sense, there isn't really any nuclear fusion going on inside of them. There is no battle. There is no war for righteousness. There is no war to try and live for Jesus. There is no battle. Whereas for a Christian, the New Testament says we've been given a new nature, right? We are new creations in Christ. But Paul is so clear in Romans that often there's that tug of war between our old nature and a new nature. And so that battle is real. In fact, when you engage in that battle, that's when we truly shine, right? Because with the power of God and the desire that the Spirit gives you, that's when you shine. And I think that's the hard work that he's talking about, because he doesn't want us to be like the crooked and perverse people of this world. And then he carries on saying in verse 16, "Hold firmly to the word of life. Then on the day of Christ Jesus, I'll be proud that I did not run the race in vain, and that my work was not useless. You know what he's talking about here? Paul wants to know that all his efforts that he's put into the Philippian church has not been in vain. Like he wants to know that it's not useless. You know why Paul is saying that? Because you and I, what makes us human beings is that we are literally meaning machines. Right? That's part of what makes us human beings, is that we need to find meaning in what we do. And Paul is almost saying, you know, in the end of time, when Christ comes, I want to know that my work with you has been meaningful. It's meant something, that it wasn't useless, that it did not result in nothing, that I did not run the race in vain. And I often wonder if we ever take time in our lives to think about whatever we're doing has any meaning or not. You know, I mean, 100 years from now, is anything that we do and the things that we put so much energy, so much time, so much effort in, does it have any meaning? And I think we tend to lose meaning in our lives when we are not connected deeply and profoundly to the one who gives us meaning in our lives. And often you'll find, in fact, 9 times out of 10, what really gives us meaning in life is connected to the joy and the happiness and the upbuilding and the encouragement of other people. That is what ultimately gives us meaning in life. I mean, you can try, man. If you're trying to climb up the corporate ladder and whatever, you get up there and then you realize this is not what was sold to me. You know, oh, if only I had that much money, and then you get there and you're like, actually, this is not as fulfilling as I thought. You know, I don't know what it is for you, but perhaps there is this thing inside you where you're desperate for meaning. And the reason why you're desperate for meaning is because we are meaning machines. That's what makes us human. God created us to have meaning. That's why Paul himself here is echoing that. He says, I want to know that I did not run this race in vain, man. I want to know that my work with you guys was not useless. So as you reorient your heart and your mind, just think about 100 years from now, are some of the things that you do, are you even going to care about it? Is it even going to matter in the bigger scheme of things? Because 99 times out of 100, the things that really are meaningful has to do with others, has to do with pleasing God, has to do with bringing Him joy, has to do with the mission that God has called you for. You know, that's how you want to end your life. And then in verse 17, it says, but I will rejoice even if I lose my life, pouring it out like a liquid offering to God, just like your faithful service is an offering to God. And I want all of you to share that joy. Yes, you should rejoice, and I will share your joy. You know, when someone repeats a word twice, you should pay attention to it. You know, when he says, my life was like pouring out like a liquid offering to God. He says, this is your faithful service. So it's like a pouring out an offering to God. But what does that look like, you know? I don't know, who here likes a good glass of wine? Don't be shy. I mean, yeah, right? You like wine, you know? Obviously in proportion, you know, I mean. But, and you know your limits. Some people, 1 glass is okay, you know. And Sasha says 2 glasses, so if Sasha's visiting, just make sure. Make sure no more than 2 glasses. Make sure no more than 2 glasses. You know, Kirsty likes a glass of wine every now and again. For some reason, I just don't do wine or any form of alcohol. Like, the taste doesn't appeal to me. Like, I taste them, like, oh, you know, I'd rather have fruit juice or whatever, you know. But I don't do wine. But wine is great, and you know, people who know their wines, they can tell whether a bottle is cheap or expensive. You know, so you can't hide it. You know, and once I was invited for dinner to someone's place, so you know, I went and I was looking at all the wine bottles, and some of the prices are like, you know, it's like wow, I don't know if I want to get. So let's just say I bought a bottle of wine that was more on the lower side of, and I thought, okay, this person will be impressed, if I bring this to their house, I brought this nice bottle of wine. And it was so funny because I said, hey, here's something for you, and they're like, oh, this is nice. This is like an everyday wine, It's something you drink every day. And I thought, oh my goodness, I definitely am not a wine drinker. They could tell that this was a cheapy wine. But what if, you're a wine drinker and, someone gave you a really expensive bottle of wine, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rands worth of wine. And what you do is then you just go outside and you open the bottle of wine and you just pour it all out. Just on the floor, on the ground. Just like that. I mean, can you imagine the wine drinkers? They'd be like, what are you doing? What a waste of such good wine. Absolute waste. Where Paul gets this image from, that he says, my life is poured out like a liquid offering to God, like a sacrifice, an offering. Back in those days, they would have understood some of the sacrifices that were going around, some of the animal sacrifices. And what happened was when they sacrificed animals, this is not necessarily the Jewish custom, but when people used to sacrifice some of the animals to their gods, what they used to do is take the best wine, the choicest wine, and pour it out on the sacrifice. And what happened was, because it was such good wine, just the steam and the aroma that came out, for them, they thought that would be a sweet-smelling aroma, that it would rise up to their gods. You see, that was the picture that Paul was trying to invoke when he's talking about, my work with you guys and for you guys, and your work for God is like a great bottle of wine, something that is so expensive that is poured out, it's sacrificial, but you might sometimes think it is a waste of such good wine, but the aroma actually goes up to the Lord, and He sees your life being poured out for Him and for the sake of His people, and He's pleased with that. This is what Paul is talking about here, and even as he concludes this part of the text, he talks about the joy that he gets, from this. See, there's no one else in this earth who's poured out his life for others more than Jesus. There is no one else. I mean, we saw last week that literally it says he emptied himself, right? He poured out his life, and his life was a sweet-smelling fragrance to God. And I think sometimes we know that as Christians, yes, there should be a pouring out. But sometimes you're so drained and you so lack energy, that you feel like there's nothing that I have to pour out anymore. Right? But what do you do when you get to that point where you feel like there's nothing that I have to pour out? You see, what we don't understand is Jesus is always pouring out into us. Right? He's pouring out into us. But if our insides, right, if our inner man is not becoming healthy, like if we're not doing the internal work inside of us, wrestling with God and then getting to know the multifaceted nature that is God, all of who He is, His holiness, His righteousness, His love, all of those things, if that's not going on inside of us, then it's almost like what God is pouring into you, it's like it's been wasted into a black hole. Literally. So it's not like a star that can hold all of the nuclear fusion and energy that's inside of it. It's just like a black hole. And so whatever God is pouring you is going in, and you're not able to pour it out. You see, that's the hard work that Paul is talking about here. And so I've often wondered, whether my life has been that, whether it's been a pouring out of what God has poured into me. See, you and I, friends, you would not be here if Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God, did not pour Himself out for you. Every last breath that He had as He hung on that cross, every last drop till he could not anymore. And then he gave up his spirit, the Bible says. And then he hung his head and he died. You see, in the Christian faith, there's both a pouring in and a pouring out. But we will never be able to contain what God has poured out into us and pour out for others, and in that get joy, if that work is not happening inside of us, friends. You see, often we feel like we've grown up in churches where that work, we feel it's not my responsibility, hey? It's my core group leader's responsibility. They prepare all the work. They're the ones who pour into me. Or it's my counselor's responsibility, right? They're the one who counsel me. They're the one who see me. So it's their job to pour into me. And then the result will be evident. Or it's my pastor's responsibility. It's his job to kind of like prepare a good sermon every Sunday and pour into me. And so it's everyone else's responsibility, right? It's the worship team's responsibility to be so good in their music and to be so connected and anointed with God that they can lead us into worship. It's everyone else's responsibility. And Paul is encouraging us here, no, it is our responsibility. Work hard is to show the result of your salvation. Out of what? Out of deep reverence and awe for God. You see, I never want you to lose your amazement of God. He should never cease to amaze you. There is so much more to discover about Jesus. His wisdom. I mean, just his wisdom alone is astounding. His power. You know, I was just thinking about it the other day. The earth is just like a tiny speck in a universe that is 1,000,000 times bigger than us. And that universe is amongst 1,000,000 other universes that are bigger than this universe. Man, who are we? You know, who are we to think that we are anything? But yet God loved us. Yet God loved us. Man, results count, guys. I mean, you guys who are, you know, Man United fans, I don't know if I see any Man United fans in the room. But, you know, it's all Liverpool. Oh, there is one Man United fan. Yes. You know, like, you know, your coach is under pressure because he's not shown the results. You know, so he can't, you know, your coach can't just laze around and go, man, it doesn't matter. The results don't matter. Man, he's on the verge of being sacked. And yesterday he breathed a huge sigh of relief because his team just managed to win. Results do matter in the Christian faith. The outworking, the fruit that comes out of us, that comes when that work has happened inside of you, right? A deep, deep work that happens between you and God. I know you can't see stars in Joburg, but next time you are out of the bush and you're able to see lots of stars, do you know what's fascinating? You know what's really, really fascinating? A lot of those stars that you see in the sky, they no longer exist. They're not there anymore. So how can you see the bright lights of the stars? You see, those stars no longer exist because they're so far away. They're millions, millions and millions of light years away. They no longer exist, but their light is still evident. Think about that. See, one day, you're not going to be here anymore. One day, you're no longer going to exist in this world. But your light will continue to shine through all the people that you touch and all the people that you influence. Because you chose to shine bright. You chose to do that work inside of your friends. Who are you touching today? Whose life are you influencing? Whose life are you pouring into in the same way Jesus has poured into you? Not saying it's going to be easy. No, it's hard. I mean, I'll sit down with you one day and tell you how hard it's been to plant a church. But it's not just me, it's all of us are called to pour into one another's lives. All of us are called to invest into one another. Man, it's not just a Sunday attendance thing, you know? And like we often hope that it's not in vain, like Paul said. Man, like I want to be that star that after I'm long gone, my light is still shining. That amazes me, you know? The stars are some of those lights. The lights of some of the stars are still shining, even though they no longer exist. Wow. That's really, really incredible. Just as we do communion today, just ponder on what was poured into you, friends. What it cost God to pour out His life into you. What it cost God for His blood to be poured out of you, so that you're no longer defined by your sin. You know, so as SK passes the cup around, just ponder on that for a moment.